Kentucky basketball's in a bit of a tough spot this weekend against the Alabama Crimson Tide, but I'm here to tell you how the Cats are going to pull off the upset.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be previewing Kentucky basketball's rematch with the Alabama Crimson Tide. A very tough matchup for the Cats here, but I think the Wildcats can pull off the upset. Going to break down how they can do that on today's show. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. Thank you so much to everybody who has already done so. If you got any comments, score predictions, thoughts about this game, leave those in the YouTube comments below. If you're listening on podcast, at Locked On UK on Twitter is where you can follow or hit me with your thoughts there. All right, Kentucky basketball rematching with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Kentucky up to 18-8, 7-6 in SEC play. Alabama went on a 6-game winning streak after beating the Cats in Rupp earlier this season, but now on a 2-game skid, having lost back-to-back games against Auburn in Tuscaloosa and then on the road against Mizzou, where the Tigers just popped off. Offensively, we're going to be using a lot of that tape actually to discuss how the Cats, I think, here could pull off the upset. But first, before we get into kind of how Kentucky can pull off the upset, kind of keys to the game, X factors, matchups, and such, with Kentucky's debilitated roster, at least in the state that it's currently in, what can't happen again for UK and Mark Pope? Well, first things first, if you remember what happened in the first matchup, Kentucky did not start particularly hot. In fact, Alabama knocked down a ton of outside shots. Grant Nelson hit 2 big threes in the early going. Bama was able to get momentum going. They were able to run in transition. A lot of things went wrong for Kentucky in the first few minutes of the game, and they kind of had to scratch and claw their way back into it. When they did, towards the end of the game, things just kind of fell apart. Lamont Butler made a couple of bad mistakes. Kentucky didn't close out. Things kind of unraveled. And a lot of it, I think, had to do with the way that the game started. And that was kind of a theme, right, for Kentucky, at least for the first 2/3 of this schedule, is that they were not really able to grab a lot of momentum, a lot of energy at the beginning of contests, and they had to fight their way back into it. Pope had to kind of coach his way back into it, get the players fired up for playing defense, setting up sets for the Cats to work through. And now you've seen over these past, I would say, 5 or 6 games, minus the Ole Miss game, Kentucky has really shown some heart and some fight and some punch early. If you want to go look at that Vanderbilt game, actually, that Kentucky just played, they ran some really impressive sets at the beginning of that contest. One where it was able to get Kobe Brea open for a 3 after a couple of different curls to the basket weren't open. Then you saw this little screen to get Carr open on his way to the rim. It was impressive. The way Kentucky is fighting, not just at the beginning of a game, but throughout the course of a game over these past several contests is impressive. And I think part of it has to do with the new faces, the fresh freshmen, I guess you should say. Their fresh legs, they're getting out here to kind of show what they're capable of for really the first time this year against some good competition. They're out there fighting. Colin Chandler was really good against Vanderbilt. You've seen Travis Perry have his moments despite being a traffic cone on defense, essentially. Trent Noah had his massive game against Tennessee. You're seeing the bench produce. You're seeing the young guys produce. You have to be able to get that energy, get that efficiency, get that excitement out of these kids at the beginning of the game, especially on defense. You cannot let Alabama start this game hot, shooting the basketball from beyond the arc. I also think that pace is a really big factor in this one. I think you need to slow the game down. We've talked about it a little bit before when we look at analytics. We talk about the pace of play. We talk about adjusted tempo. We talk about the average possession length. But for here, Alabama, the game that Kentucky played against Alabama, had a pace of 78, according to KenPom. And that's pretty fast. Kentucky was playing that quickly at the beginning of the year against some of their non-conference opponents, but as they've gotten into SEC play, more methodical, styles have ensued, and so you're seeing slower, more thought-out stuff, more sets, more getting into actions, more looking for shots instead of just having them wide open against weaker competition. That Alabama game, there was some chaos, especially at the beginning and the end of it, that Kentucky just didn't really handle very well. Down Jaxson, down Butler. I don't expect Lamont Butler to play in this game. If he does, I'll be shocked. I think he can provide some insane value against Mark Sears, but Sears kind of tore it up in the previous contest. We'll get to that later. I think you need to slow the game down. Take it down from that 78 pace, take it down to 73, 72, make Alabama work for their stuff. Do not let them take early offense unless it's just a horrible shot. If they're just fogging it up and things aren't going well, you kind of need to control the pace in this one. I also think that rebounds are going to be really important. In the first contest, Alabama grabbed 15 offensive rebounds, three of them, if I'm not mistaken, to LeBaron Philon, a guard. You cannot allow rebounds and second chance opportunities on long misses. If it's going to come hard off of the rim, somebody has to jump up there and grab that board before a Bama player can rush in, grab it, and kick it out for another three opportunity. You saw it a couple of times against Vandy. You've seen it all season long against UK, I think at various crucial points, especially in that Bama game first time around, actually. You cannot allow that to happen again. And then the final thing here that can't happen again, you cannot put Bama on the line 34 times again. You can't put them on the charity stripe that much. So it's going to be a lot of discipline. I think defensively, it's going to be a lot of intensity. It's going to be a lot of aggression. We'll talk about the happy medium between aggression and overly being aggressive on defense later on in the show. But you have to control the start. You have to slow the game down. You have to limit their opportunities on the glass, and you cannot put them on the free throw line. You are asking a lot of your team defensively in this one, but with the way Kentucky's been playing recently, I think they're heading into this game in the right mindset to play good defense, which is really, I think, the start of what anybody needs to play good defense is the mentality of, I want to play defense, I'm excited to play defense, I want to win, and I know that it's going to take everything on this end of the floor for us to have an opportunity to do that. So those are the things that I think cannot happen again. We're going to get to the rest of this preview here, talk about the X factors. What has Bama been up to since they beat Kentucky? Kind of how Missouri took them out to the woodshed. Can the Cats replicate some of the stuff that they did on offense? How Amari Williams could impact this game, keys to the game, all of that and more. Before we do that, of course, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Roy. Attention, Locked On Kentucky fans. The future of college sports is here, and it's transparent because before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happened under the table, and fans didn't really have a clear way to directly support the athletes that they love. But now with Roy, you get to be a part of the change and support Kentucky athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose the player that you want to support. You can decide how much you want to contribute, and you can receive exclusive content from the athletes that you back. And the best part? If your player transfers, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. For a limited time, Roy is matching up to $100 per Kentucky fan. That means your impact is doubled, helping you keep your favorite players right where they belong here in Lexington. The Roy app is giving fans control. There's no more uncertainty because now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and future of college sports with your contributions. You can download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Locked On Kentucky athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real meaningful impact. This right here is the future of college sports. You can join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. All right, continuing along here on the Thursday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I really appreciate you guys locking on to the show today. If you've got any thoughts about this Kentucky matchup with Alabama, please let me know. Final score predictions, by the way, in the comments. Drop them. If you've not subscribed, would appreciate it if you did so. You can follow me on Twitter again at Locked On UK if you've got any questions about this matchup. All right, so we've talked about what can't happen again for the Kentucky Wildcats, about the things about rebounding, defensive energy. Let's get to first, what exactly has Bama been up to since they played Kentucky? Well, to be completely honest with you, the first 2/3 of their SEC slate were pretty easy, not going to lie. I mean, they faced off against 4 different quad 2 opponents before they got to this brutal stretch here. And it wasn't in a row, by the way. It was kind of spaced out. They faced off against 4 quad 2 and 4 quad 1 opponents, 1 quad 3 against LSU at home. And now they have this final stretch here where they close out the regular season against 9 straight quad 1 teams. It was kind of easy for them. The fact that they lost to Ole Miss at home earlier this year, I think shows the weaknesses. It shows the ability for them to lose at home. I think the Auburn game represents that as well. That came last Saturday. But look at this. They scored 102 points against Kentucky. Then they turned around, came back home, scored 103 against Vanderbilt. They beat LSU by 7. They beat Mississippi State by 4. They beat Georgia by 11 at home. They went on the road. They only beat Arkansas by 4. They came back, went to Austin, scored 103 points against Texas before losing 94-85 to Auburn and 110-98 to Missouri. The defense, as improved as it is relative to last season, has struggled at various points. If you want to look at what they're doing specifically in SEC play, they're dead last in the SEC in creating turnovers. They are average in the conference and allowing opponents to get to the foul line, giving up second chance points. They do not block shots. They do not create steals. What is really helping them is their efficiencies at the rim and outside the arc. They're 6th in the SEC in conference-only 3-point defense and 5th in 2-point defense, conference only. They're 2nd in free throw percentage, which you can't really control, I don't think, consistently, unless you're just fouling the right guys every single time. But they're 10th in the SEC in defensive efficiency overall. And again, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they just don't create a lot of havoc. Neither does Kentucky. And that's why you saw a track meet in Rupp first time these two teams met. But you'll notice again here, playing some pretty weak competition relative to what their final slate's going to be. Only beating Arkansas by 4, beating State by 4, who has been down recently, beating LSU, the second worst team in this league, by 7. At home, mind you. This has been an Alabama team that can score with anybody, but if their defense is not locking in and they can't hit a volume of threes from beyond the arc, they're having a bit of a problem. And I think that was really emphasized in their most recent loss to the Missouri Tigers. Yes, Alabama ended up hitting 13 threes. Yes, they shot 64% inside the arc. But look at what Missouri did. Offensively for the Tigers, they shot 26 of 35 inside the arc, 74.3%. If we thought Kentucky's defense has been bad, that is an awful mark for the Crimson Tide in this individual game. I think it's mostly matchup related, but we've also seen Alabama struggle in other contests at the rim as well. So I don't necessarily think this is a one-off thing. And now that they're coming off the heels of this loss, you can look at this one of two ways. You can say, okay, well, Alabama's due to throttle somebody. Kentucky's down 3 players. It's in Tuscaloosa. Bama's pretty angry, especially considering their last 2 losses. Kentucky's going to have a hard time here. They might get blown out by 50. Who knows? You could look at it that way. Or you could say, look, Bama, as the season has wound down, yes, they've picked up some wins, but they've struggled against some lesser competition, while also having lost their last 2 games because their drop coverage has just not been good against anybody. They haven't been able to control anyone. Mark Mitchell for Missouri, 31 points on 10 of 12 shooting, hit 8 free throws. Missouri didn't even really, they did not dominate the boards either. 9 offensive rebounds to Alabama's 11. It's just simply about controlling the rim. And this goes back to what I keep saying about Kentucky and their pace in this matchup. Slow it down, be more aggressive, make Alabama work a little bit, and then on the offensive end, execute whenever you have the opportunity. Look for different things within your sets instead of just firing up a 3 in transition or fogging something up. You have to be deliberate. You have to be decisive in the way that you attack here. I think it's very important for Kentucky to be patient and decisive in this game against Alabama because I think they can be rewarded by scoring a lot of points at the rim. We'll get to keys to the game here in a second. I think that Alabama is a very difficult opponent to beat, but they have proven here at various points, hey, look, we can lose at home, and then we can also struggle against lesser competition when we're not fully locked in. I think they're going to want this one. I think they frankly need it. They've kind of played themselves. One of my friends that's actually an Alabama fan said recently, like they've kind of played them off of the 2 seed line or the 1 seed line. So they're going to be a 2 at this point, and they need games like this to keep that as a possibility. I think this is a very interesting scenario Kentucky's walking into because I think it's a volatile matchup. Just with the way that Alabama plays and how well Kentucky is playing defensively right now. The X factors in this one. I think Grant Nelson is your biggest X factor here for Alabama. He hasn't played well as of late, but he's due for a good game, and he dropped 25 points on UK last time, and Kentucky doesn't really have an answer for him personnel-wise. Otega Owe is the X factor for Kentucky. Second game in a row where I think he's your X factor. He had a great game versus Vanderbilt. I asked him to be efficient, scoring at the rim. I needed him to be a volume and efficient scorer. I need him to go like 7 of 10, 7 of 12, make your shots, and then get to the free throw line and hit. You have to make your free throws in this game. And then defensively, I think he's one of the only players on this roster that can stay in front of the likes of Sears, Holloway, Philon, etc. If Kentucky wants to use Amari Williams as primarily a post player again, I think he could be extremely valuable in this game as well. I listed him as essentially a second X factor. He was great versus Vanderbilt. Didn't miss a shot, blocked shots, distributed the ball. He's playing at a level right now that I don't think we can fully appreciate. I think we will once he's gone. And the personnel here is different. Amari is tough to play against offensively. But pacing, philosophy, inside-out basketball, making Alabama respect you at the rim could be the same. Same thing that happened in Vanderbilt. You need efficiency inside the arc. I think Amari and Owe can provide that too. So keys to the game here. What are the 5 most important things Kentucky needs to do? And if they do these things, I think they can win this game. I think they can pull off the upset. Here's how they're going to do it. You need to find the medium between closing out short and closing out overly aggressive. Against Vanderbilt, it seemed like a lot in that first half. Kentucky was either closing out too short and leaving some players open. Thankfully, Vanderbilt didn't hit too much. Or they were being overly aggressive and players were just driving by them and getting to the rim or getting fouled. You have to find the medium between that. I think this roster can do it. I believe that defensively they can find that within themselves, especially with how they've been playing as of late. If you're going to win this game, you need to win the free throw line. You need to take more free throws and make more free throws than Alabama does in this contest. Full stop. I think you need to win the three-point line, and not in terms of efficiency, meaning like, oh, they only hit 28% and we hit 40%, but volume. You need to take more threes. If you look up and you say, oh, look, Kentucky took 32 threes in this game, and they made 11 of them, right? That efficiency is not crazy. I had to do the math here real quick. So that would be 34.3%, but you hit 11 threes. And then Alabama took like 27 and they made 9, right? Same efficiency essentially, but different volume. Yeah, it's almost the same efficiency, 33% to 34%. You have to find ways to scheme guys open and be efficient inside the arc, but have volume outside. I hope that makes sense. Control the pace of the game. It's your 4th key here. I think it's pretty straightforward. And then the final thing here, you need to find a way to do something against Mark Sears. Something as in literally anything defensively. He had 9 assists to 1 turnover last go-around. You have to create more havoc, or he has to be a less efficient shooter. It's one of the two. I think Kentucky pulls it off. I think they have the ability to do these 5 things. I don't know if they'll necessarily do all 5 of them, but if they do 4, I think they have a great chance to win. If they do all 5, I think they take the dub. I think they're capable. I'm calling this upset. I have not been particularly high on Kentucky this season. And I said in the recap episode after the Vanderbilt game, I wouldn't take Kentucky to win this game. After the way the Missouri game ended, and knowing how desperate this Kentucky team is to show what they're capable of without some of their star players, I think they're going to want it just as much as Bama does. I think they're going to come in there with a good game plan. I think they're going to show up and execute, and they're going to make Kentucky fans proud. I normally don't have extreme takes like this on the show. I'm willing to step out on this one, and if I'm wrong, I'll eat it. I don't think I will be. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at Locked On or Lance_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. That is also the wrong hotkey. Awesome. You can leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about this game. Final score predictions. I will see you all on Saturday for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.